Well, right after we moved in, we were using both downstairs and upstairs, and people would come back from being upstairs and asking if anybody else was up there with them because they heard footsteps and noises and felt like someone was up there with them. So we figured this is an old building built in 1944, so it was probably the building settling or creaking, so we didn't put much credence into those stories. Well, shortly after we bought the building, people would come in off the street and start telling us, asking us if we knew what the history of the building was, and they were relaying a story of things that happened in the past when it was a dry cleaners. And we've had incidents where someone would be in the building by themselves and the music would turn up full volume. There's an incident of someone that was so sure someone was in the building. He was a police officer, and he did a clearing of the whole building and the outside with his gun drawn because he was so sure he was not alone.
Did he find anything?
He didn't. He did not. He kept hearing the noises, but he decided just to call it a night and wait for daylight.
Are there certain areas of the building that seem to have more activity than others?
There are. We didn't notice it at first, but we had a couple of employees who seemed very level-headed at first, but in particular in the far corner of the downstairs, which was where he worked, all of a sudden, for whatever reason, his personality took a turn to the dark side. He was very antagonistic and always trying to start a fight. And then upstairs in the northwest corner of the building is where we experienced most of the activity.
Every day, thousands of people drive down Hibiscus Boulevard, past the Infinity Bicycle Shop, but the sordid and scary history of the building may leave you with your wheels spinning. Long before the site carried the latest gear for those who like to pedal about town, it was Van's Laundry, and the scene of one of the most unthinkable murders the then tiny town of Melbourne had witnessed.
On December 9, 1955, the murdered body of 29-year-old Melbourne resident Patricia Van Egan was discovered in her car near the intersection of what is now US 1 and Palmetto Avenue. In the trunk of the 1955 Chevrolet convertible was the dead body of Patricia's 7-year-old daughter Phyllis. Both mother and daughter had suffered from blunt force trauma that killed them. The Van Egan family lived just off of Strawbridge Avenue in Melbourne, and the murder investigation naturally turned first to Patricia's husband and Phyllis's father, Philip Van Egan. Investigators discovered that 16 months prior to the murders, Van Egan's 4-year-old son Roger died from what was believed to be a playground accident, but in light of the killings of his mother and sister, that death now seems suspicious as well. Philip Van Egan worked at Van's Laundry at the corner of Morningside Drive and Hibiscus Boulevard in Melbourne. Blood found at that property led the investigators to determine that Van Egan had killed his wife and daughter there before leaving them in the family's cream-colored Chevrolet convertible with red trim.
Investigators also found blood on Van Egan's tennis shoes. In newspaper articles published at the time, the state attorney's office surprised Melbourne residents seeking only an indictment in the daughter's death. The state attorney believed if Van Egan was acquitted in Phyllis's murder, they could then seek a second indictment for his wife's slaying, giving them 2 shots at making sure Van Egan was put away. During the course of the investigation, officials and town residents also started to discuss another accidental death just more than a year earlier. Was there a pattern with Philip Van Egan and his children?
Van Egan's son Roger was killed in what was described as a playground accident. From what I've read, he was supposedly hit in the head with a swing. Now, in light of the murders of his mother and sister, it seems suspect that they were killed by blunt force trauma, and certainly being hit by a swing would also look like blunt force trauma, so it kind of raises suspicions as to whether Van Egan killed his son first and then killed his wife and daughter 16 months later.
In fact, local historian and author Anne Rayleigh Flote said that the day of the incident with Roger, Van Egan took the boy to the Brevard Hospital, claiming he'd fallen out of a swing, crushing his skull. Later, his accounts would change to falling out of a tree or getting hit by a baseball bat. Flote says that during the trial for Phyllis's death, there were accounts from children who claimed to have witnessed Van Egan at the playground bashing his own son's head with a baseball bat. The first trial for Phyllis's killing ended in a hung jury, but upon retrial, the judge instructed the jury to come to a final decision. And Van Egan,
But he was found guilty of second-degree murder and the killing of his daughter Phyllis. He was sentenced to 20 years to life in Rayford Prison. Van Egan was denied parole in 1970, but he escaped from prison in 1972. He remained free until 1980. During that time, he remarried. Just 1 year after he was recaptured, Van Egan was granted parole. In 1984, he was deported to Canada, where he was born. The graves of Patricia, Phyllis, and Roger Van Egan remained unmarked until 1996, when former Melbourne Police Lieutenant Bobby Bowen and cemetery supply owner J.R. Williford led an effort to have the graves marked. Philip Van Egan was reportedly very appreciative of the effort to have headstones placed on the graves of his family.
standing at the graves of the Van Egan family at the Melbourne Cemetery, you can actually see the back of the building that once housed their family business, and if not for a small thicket of palmetto trees, the very spot where Patricia was believed to have met her violent end. According to Flote, after Van Egan's release from prison, he was seen by a maintenance worker standing over the graves of his family. He didn't speak to anyone, and was never seen in the Melbourne area again. Inside the building, however, an eerie energy fills a room at the back of the building. Is an echo from Phyllis's murder lingering in that room, or is it something more sinister?
Infinity Bike Shop, like we set up, the story itself it's just, you go in there knowing that story, and the minute you walk in, you just feel that heaviness. The upstairs, the floors aren't level at all. So in one particular room, everybody was going in there saying they felt uneasy. They felt like something like wanted to push them out of the room. But our tech manager, Seth, who has actually been on ships and subs his whole life, went in there and he goes, I can tell you exactly why everybody doesn't want to be in this room. Because the hallway is fairly level, but when you walk into the room, it immediately slopes down to the left. Which when you turn around, your perspective is all askew and it feels like you're very uncomfortable and you just want to leave that room. So other than that room, we set up, did some EVP sessions. We had the spirit box, we had the thermal imaging camera, the K2s, the EMFs, and all the stationary cameras. They came through the spirit box a lot for Robert. I don't know if you want me to say what it said to Robert. No. It said a lot of negative things to Robert. Called him a lot of names, a lot of vulgarity. And on the actual, he said he got pushed at one point. And on the actual real-time EVP, when my investigators were upstairs on the real-time, you hear my investigator Shirley say, oh, we can't go back down there, he got pushed. And then after that is a different voice, and I cross-compared to everybody that was there at the time, says, can't go, he got pushed. Like repeating her after her. It was a female voice. A lot of the voices that we caught were female. The male voice tended to only come through the spirit box. We got a couple of little laughs and little voices and stuff, but nothing really prevalent. The female voice, more than anything, was prevalent.
So are the spirits of Patricia and Phyllis Van Egan still lingering at the Infinity Bike Shop? That's uncertain. But given the proximity from the crime scene to their graves, perhaps for this mother-daughter duo, that particular resting place is a difficult one to rest in peace.